My dear sisters and brothers in Christ, I want to welcome you to this presentation. And indeed, it is for me an opening where I trust that this place could be used for educational engagement and enlightenment, and will so shift the focus of the building into a greater way of us doing church and how we seek to learn. This month, as you are aware, is African Awareness Month, and I will have to say a little bit more after that. Therefore, let us stand to pray. Almighty God, the fountain of all wisdom, enlighten with your wisdom those who teach and those who learn, that rejoicing in the knowledge of your truth, we may be able to serve you in our generation, serve one another, and bring our humanity to a common unity, where we can rejoice with each other as we grow in your love through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Can you be seated? It is a pleasure to see you and make sure that you are incident free. But it's indeed a pleasure to have with us Dr. Goodridge. I know that Dr. Goodridge is not given to these long bios, but suffice to say that Dr. Goodridge has a good knowledge of the African continent. He did some work there in his academic life, and he lectures at the University of the West Indies Capital Campus in the Department of History. As I said, what I have known of him, he might not even want me to be calling Dr. Goodridge for too long, but we have to give him his due and his title. And so we welcome you, Dr. Goodridge, no stranger to us. You'll see him in St. Luke's Church, sitting about 3 to 4 seats from the back. I remember the ushers asked me, who is Dr. Goodridge? The man that used to be right in front of you. So that he's part of us, and this is one thing that I'm hoping to achieve, that we can bring from among us those persons who have something to offer, so that we start by looking inside before we go outside. It's with this in mind that I asked Dr. Goodridge to consider addressing us on this event and this African Awareness time, and he so consented. So without any further ado, I will invite Dr. Goodridge to come and address us. Welcome, Doctor, and good to see you again.
Good evening. Let me first of all say thanks to the priest and to the council of St. Luke's for inviting me to deliver the lecture. or I should say talk, because the other thing I should say is about Dr. Watson and his introduction. People usually refer to him as Richard Goodridge rather than Dr. Goodridge. But it is more comfortable for me, basically. And as I always say to people, if you used to get paid when you call me Dr. Goodridge, I would insist that you call me someone that makes some money. Now, before I begin, I would probably like to ask, what do you know about Africa? And anything in particular? Because I have my ideas about what I want to talk about and what I'm going to talk about. When I spoke to Captain Watson, we talked basically about what we call the identity and culture of Barbadians in terms of like the African bit. But I just want, before I begin, if there's anything in particular that you would want me to talk about when I do that. Because it makes no sense to me standing up here talking and then you don't want to hear what I'm talking about. Is there anything in particular?
The exploitation of Africa by the European countries.
Alright, thank you. When I come and look at this slave trade, because at some point I have to talk about the transatlantic slave trade, I'll make reference to it. Alright. Any other areas, anything else?
I think it's been my ancestor. So I want to know, will it ever be possible to trace your ancestry?
Very good question.
Yeah.
Very good question. It's one of the things I have down to talk about in terms of the whole discussion and the argument about where we come from and that kind of thing. And particularly given these days, there's this great interest in DNA testing and everything, and then you get these wonderful DNA results that tell you come from 10 different places and that kind of thing, which is potentially possible. Alright. Now, what I want to do is look at the discussion in the context of a little bit of a debate that we had about the African impact or the African influence on Barbados. And part of it stems from this idea that we are English, that, we are very English, we're not African. Okay? And so I want to look at that. I also want to look more at the question you asked about, having decided whether we're English or African. Of course, I'm considered African. Then we look and see where in Africa we might have come from. And then we look and see some of the obvious African influences, even if we don't always recognize them as being African. But I also want to touch briefly at the end on why we probably don't know more about the African heritage in Barbados. Okay? Now, for a long time, there's been a discussion about whether under slavery and after, whether the African culture had been eliminated from the black population in Barbados. There are some who argue that because of the slavery regime and the fact that the slave masters are dominant to the extent they determine life and death, it was impossible for African culture to survive. And the people who make this argument also pay attention to things like the slave laws which are enacted. Because in Barbados and elsewhere, there are laws which were designed to stamp out African culture, particularly laws on things like religion. Right? And again, Barbados will be become like Obeah. But you'll be looking at things like the names, the way in which, you no longer, or the way in which African names sort of got wiped out and we were using essentially English names. So the idea is that the fact that the slave masters, the whites, had this total control, then it was impossible for African culture to survive. And there's another argument which says that what the slave masters used to do is that in order to keep the Africans from gathering together and overthrowing the system, they used to mix them up. And once you had them mixed up, then it was impossible for their culture to survive. Right? I'm not quite sure that that is entirely accurate, but it makes there's a certain kind of logic or a certain kind of sense to it. Right? And then they tell you, the other thing is that Barbados was a peculiar place in the sense that it reproduced its slave population from relatively early. So for example, in early 1800s, when the British are thinking of abolishing the slave trade, Barbados is not opposing it. Places like Jamaica, Trinidad, Guyana definitely are opposed to it. But Barbados said, go right ahead, ain't about it. And the reason for that was that if they were the population here, they were actually born here. By the time you come to emancipation in 1834, most of the blacks in Barbados had been born here. So the argument is, having been born here, they could not have had African culture. Right? Now, there are certain flaws in those arguments. The first thing is to recognize that African culture not only survived and thrived, but the whites actually copied it. And if you look in, we're going to do research on Barbados history, you're going to, especially when you get like people coming from England to visit Barbados, one of the things they used to complain about was the fact that the whites behaved like the slaves, that they spoke like them in particular. Right? I mean, the one thing I have to say love about white Asians is they have a beautiful accent. Unlike us, we got all kind of accents. Priests, no offense, but you just say listen to the priest talking and you wonder which accent he comes from. Because they ain't quite there. I suppose it's having to say the prayers and all sorts of things and they lose that accent a little bit. But what the visitors to Barbados would frequently tell you is that the whites in Barbados spoke like the blacks. They dressed like the blacks sometimes. And generally, to use the quotation, they said, they behave like Negroes. Right? So if you get whites coming from Britain, from Ireland and so, and making these comments that the whites are behaving like the Africans, then it's reasonable to assume that the African culture has not died out, that it was still present. Right? That's one. The other thing is, yes, it is true that by the time you got to 1800 or so, most of the blacks have been born here, but it doesn't mean that because they are born here, they don't experience African culture. In the sense that, yes, you're born here, but you're born into a space in which Africans have been living. And there's every possibility that you're talking about passing down behavior, passing down attitudes, passing down values. So even though you're born here, but not born in Africa, it does not mean you're not learning African things and African ways. Right? But more importantly, the scholars like Kamal Brathwaite, who looks at Barbados and the Barbados' history, and what Kamal says is that basically African culture in Barbados was not stamped out. It was hidden, it was submerged. So Kamal argued, the argument that he makes goes something like this. He says essentially what happens in Barbados is that the Africans and then later the blacks, all those born here, essentially what they do is they outwardly, they do the things, they dress, they talk the way that would have allowed them to move up and to survive. But deep inside, they hate things like their religion, they hate their philosophical ideas. And they also talk to each other like away from the controlling hand of the master and the overseer is what has spoken their language. And therefore, one of the things I'm going to argue about later is that we need to pay attention to language. We haven't done it enough. Right? Now, the question of where we come from. Where do barbarians come from? As my friend here says, she wants to know her ancestors. Now, where do you think it comes from, if I may ask? Where do you think it comes from? Why?
West Africa.
Nigeria's in West Africa, Senegal's in West Africa. Where do you think Ghana?
I just picked it.
You want the Ghanaian? That's all right.
I would pick Ghana because when I was raised there, I had a roommate that was from Ghana. A lot of those things that she said reminded me of the thing I got.
So you're anybody here not Ghanaian and doesn't want to be Ghanaian, wants to be from somewhere else?
My son is able to trace his ancestry to Nigeria.
All right. Now,
How do you trace that across screen?
well, let me just share something with you this way. To use since we have a couple of Ghanaians in our midst, if you, because they have the naming systems. So if you're Ghanaian, if you are like a light-skinned Ghanaian, right, or more like white-looking, they would call you, I think it is Kwasi Obreni, right? Which means essentially like Sanda white man. See, because the Kwasi is Sanda, Obreni is white man. If you're like me, you're black, you talk like a white man, which we do because we speak English, then they refer to you as Obronitonton, black white man. Now you see, you have to understand it. See, white man there is not race. White man is culture, is language, is religion, and everything. So they refer to you as Obronitonton. Right? But our common, yes, the argument for Ghana, there is, in fact, in this country, the early research, it argued, in fact, until the 1980s, people like Beckles and them were saying barbarians were Akan, Ghanaian. Right? There's a big language group in Ghana. It would include the Ashanti, it includes the Fanti and others. It's a broad group that we call Akan. And they come from Ghana. So what I call the Akan thesis, there's this argument which says barbarians are Akan. So Beckles says, for example, when we look at the early slave rebellions in Barbados, like you look like 1675 and 1692, they are led by the Akan. And in fact, Beckles goes so far in 1675 as to argue that the leader of it was a fellow called Kafi, and if they had succeeded in overthrowing the slave system, they would have given Kafi a stool. Now, I don't know if you've seen our fancy administration building at the Cato campus. It is built in the shape of the Ashanti golden stool. You see, now a stool is important to the Akan because it's a symbol of authority. But I'm not quite sure that in 1675, you have been talking about an Ashanti stool in Barbados because the kingdom of Ashanti is not properly established until around 1673. The first major king of Ashanti is a fellow called Tutu, and he's king from about 1673. But there is a sentence that says, you know, if you look at the early slave imports, if you look at the data in terms of the slave registries and things, you'll find that there are quite a few ships coming from what we now call Ghana, right? From places, departing from places like Elmina, etc. Right? Now, Another reason why we have emphasized Ghana and talked about it is partly planters in Barbados had a preference for Akan slaves, or those they call Akan. So for example, Drax up here, Drax actually is a manual of running a plantation that Drax had prepared for more of his plantations in Jamaica. He also has a plantation in Jamaica. But Drax says to his plantation manager, he says, listen, running a plantation, he says, you need money. He said, but you need good labor in terms of quantity, but more importantly, quality. And Drax says, quality slaves are the Corman teams or the Akan, the ones from Ghana. So if you look at the planters had this idea that, the Akan slaves were somehow harder working, they're more durable, they're sturdier, etc. And then they would contrast them with the Igbo. And so the Igbo had a tendency to suicide, and they were depressed and all kind of nonsense. Right? Now, the point to make there is that, the planters obviously had some idea about where they were getting their slaves from. But more importantly, the planters had preferences. So the Barbadian planters up to about the 1730s or so are telling you, when you are getting labor, please bring them from what is now Ghana. So for that reason, we would, we have to acknowledge that there's a Ghanaian presence. The other thing is that you've got the work of people like Kofi Konadu. Konadu did a book on the Akan diaspora. And one of the places he looked at was Barbados. And he said places like, he singled out Jamaica, I think Suriname and Barbados, as places where the Akan slaves, or the Ghana, what we now call Ghana, where those slaves went. So, and Konadu starts by looking at the fact that like some of the planters were sending their agents down to West Africa and saying, we want these particular slaves. Right? Now, of course, when they got across here, they didn't like a lot of them because they felt they were from two rebels. But the idea was they're saying, we are picking from a certain area. Now, one of the problems with the Akan thesis is that certainly if you look at the work of Meccles comes up with this geographical area that says the Akan area, Barbadians are Akan, they're brought from the Akan area that stretches from the modern Ghana down to Angola. That's a little far, right? But yes, we came from that area between Ghana and Angola. It's a wide area, all right? Good evening, sir. And welcome. So I think we all know our good friend, Reverend Luther Johnson. I shall not call him what I normally call him in public. I'll just call him Reverend Johnson. Now, I like to talk about what I call the Igbo thesis, which is a thesis that says, in the early days, Barbadians came largely from the Akan group, but over time, the focus of the trade shifts to the what they call the slave coast, which is Nigeria, Benin, and parts of Cameroon. Right? So, by the time you are coming to beyond 1700 to about 1800, and particularly 1730 to 1800, there's a shift. So we're not so much drawing from the Akan as we're drawing from people like the Igbo. Now, the reason for this is partly the trade itself, the slave trade shifts. Because bear in mind the slave trade begins in the 15th century, it doesn't end until about the 1830s. So in that time, the focus of the slave trade shifts from one part of the coast to the other. And it also depends on the nationality of the slave trader. But we know that from the 1670 to the British established this major slave trading company, the Royal African Company. It's about the most successful of all the English slave trading companies. The African Company does not concentrate on Ghana. It concentrates on the Nigeria area. So after a while, we start recruiting more from Nigeria. And one of the, you may still be a kind donor, you may still be Ghanaian. But one of the important things is that,
You have to come from somewhere.
all over. But it's to recognize that as like priorities change, as like business interests shift, and therefore the planters here get their enslaved from where the Royal African Company draws its slaves, where the ships go. And increasingly, that is Nigeria, no longer Ghana. Right? I'm using the modern terms. Right? Now, as my friend here says, we got somewhere. Now, see, it is important to recognize that one of the difficulties of trying to precisely determine where people come from, it is not an easy task. One, if we look, we tend to know which port they left, right? So we know they might have left Calabar, we know they might have left Douala, we know they might have left Lagos, right? We know they might have left Bonny, they might have left Elmina. But leaving the port doesn't mean they come from there. You see, because part of the thing is that the slave trade, most of those who were brought in the slave trade, they captured in war. And they mostly captured in the interior, or at least behind the coast. They drive down to the coast, shipped off to Barbados, and that's where. So coming from a particular port doesn't mean you are from that area. And I mean, probably the best example would be the Igbo, because the Igbo are one of the largest groups present in the Americas in terms of slave imports. They know the Igbo are not on the sea. They live in the forest. They live behind the sea. There are no Igbo ports. So if you just go by the port of embarkation, it doesn't help. Or it doesn't tell you everything. It just gives you a general idea that this port served a particular area in England. That's one. The second thing is to recognize that we had, there's evidence of ship's captains, the fellas making sure they come with a full load, or as full a load as possible. So they might have gone to one port, they won't get the number they want for whatever reason, might have to do with difficulties in Africa, etc. And then they went to another port. So by the time the ship arrives in Barbados, the fellas said, we left Elmina, we left the Gold Coast. The fellas actually come all the way up from Angola, or from Cameroon, or somewhere. So the danger, as I said, looking at these ports, is to recognize that when the ship gets here, they usually tell you where they left in Africa. They don't tell you where they stopped. So they might have made, and there are examples where you make more than one stop in order to make sure you get both full cargo. Right? And then we have evidence, of Africans themselves who wrote. And I give you one example, because it's a lovely title. The fellow actually wrote a book. And it's called A Narrative of the Most Remarkable Particulars in the Life of James Albert Ukaso Bonioso, an African Prince, as related by himself. That's the full title. Right? A Narrative of the Most Remarkable Particulars in the Life of James Albert Ukaso Bonioso, an African Prince, as related by himself.
Spell the name for me. I'll just sit down.
And giving me that. I promise.
Okay.
Right? Now, Bonioso, in that narrative, he says he comes to Barbados like directly from the Gold Coast. Right? So his ship comes to Barbados directly from the Gold Coast, Ghana. But he's not from there. He actually comes from Borno. Borno is actually in the interior of Nigeria. So it shows they're very different. So like, if you just look at it, he comes from the Gold Coast. he's a Gold Coast there, he's a can, he comes from Ghana. No, that's where his ship landed. He says, no, I actually come from Warren. And I mean, he's not the only one who wrote. I mean, this is one of the things we need to recognize, that the Africans actually wrote. Well, usually through the missionaries. Missionaries used to write. And of course, no disrespect missionaries, the priests used to twist around what the fellow said. in the service of God, that's the explanation. You have to point that out. Now, the other difficulty, like some of the things we've tried to do, is to work out where we come from according to how we look. Like when you were talking about your Ghanaian friend and that kind of thing. I mean, I remember, I get a personal example. I remember when I lived in Goodridge, northeastern Nigeria. I walked into an office one day in university. And this fellow said, "It got to you, it got to you." So he was wrong. And then he comes to me and he says, "I apologize, I don't mean to be rude, but it is you that people see him." So I'm lost. I look at him and I said, "What's going on?" And he says, "People have been telling me they see my junior brother come. It is you they're seeing, my brother going back to Ghana." Right? So as far as he was concerned, and he said, he knows that, I mean, he knows I don't look very much like his brother. But for somebody who's just like making a casual look, I could pass for his brother. And I've heard people say that I look Ghanaian, but I also heard people say I look like a Nigerian. And a Cameroonian. And an Angolan. No, the difficulty with the DNA testing, right? The difficulty with DNA testing is that the DNA is equating, see, it talks about like race, when you're not really talking about different races. So it would tell you, for example, we tested your DNA and we find that you're mostly from Ghana or you're mostly from Nigeria, but you got a little bit of Gabon and you think that there's a little bit of Senegal in you. You know, it's really inconclusive, and in some respects, it's really unsatisfactory, right? But at the same time, you know, you can't just look at people and say, "I can look at him and tell where he comes from," right? What I can tell you though is that the Africans have some fairly wrong ideas about how we look. That much I can tell you. And I mean, I remember. First, they landed in Nigeria, and I'm taken to the head of the department's office, and I see this secretary is staring at me all the time. And this was an early Thursday morning, and left obviously late Tuesday night. I haven't laid since then, but I know it didn't smell bad. When I checked, and once I realized it didn't smell bad, and my clothes didn't look rumply, I said, "Excuse me, why are you looking at me like that?" Because she was staring. And she said to me, you know, well, the driver had picked me up, the department driver picked me up in the airport, said, "If the driver had not brought you in here and said you were Mr. Goodridge, if you had come in here and said you were Mr. Goodridge, I'd have called security for you." And I said, "Why?" She said, "You don't look like a West Indian." I said, "How do you look like a West Indian?" She said, "You look as though you're from the north, from northern Nigeria. She said, you're skinny, you're black." And I'm like, "Eh?" She said, "West Indians are black." I said, "So what color are we?" And she says, "You look like Bob Marley. Bob Marley the West Indian." That was their, so for them, because they really don't know too much about us, right? But it is something looking. So if you just look at people, you're not going to be able to tell. And the other problem with that is that part of that is rooted in racism. And they tell you all black people look alike. I mean, that's what they say. They're all black people look alike. It can be hard to work out by just looking at people where they come from. Right? Now, names. If we look at the names of the enslaved on the plantation, it gives us an idea of where people came from. Right? Now, again here, we have to make a little bit of a warning. and to recognize that particularly the records in terms of names, much better for the period after 1838, right, than during the slavery period. And one of the things about after 1838 is that Christianity is coming in, and they're baptizing the blacks, and they're doing away with any African name. And we will have all of the good, nice Christian names from them on. Alright? But when we look at having said that, when we look at the records, what we'll find is that the names are important in the sense that names tell you a whole lot about people. I mean, we tend to name people, we name children after people. Like you name after your grandfather, or you name after your father, or maybe you name after Martin Luther King, or something, or Muhammad Ali. But when you talk to Africans and they tell you what the name is, it's basically telling you a whole lot about them. See, because the name usually conveys the circumstances of their birth. If we use your Ghana example, right? Your name is like, part of your name is the day you were born. Like we have this habit in Barbados, we call boys Kwame. Right? Some we name children Kwame, like after Kwame Nkrumah or somebody else who named Kwame. Even though the child might be born in middle of the week. If you see an Akan child, the name is Kwame, the child is born on a Saturday. So once you have Kwame, is born on a Saturday. Kofi, Friday. Yao is Thursday, Kweku is Wednesday, I think Kwabena is Tuesday, Kwado is Wednesday, and Kwesi is Sunday. So the name tells you straight away what day the person was born. And then in the Akan, I think PAC is firstborn of the first. I can't remember who the second child is, the second male, but the third one is Mensa, and the fourth one is Anan. So if you're named Kofi Anan, you're born on a Friday, but you're a fourth born child. You see? So the names are specific. I remember here we had a student, her name, and I said to her, I said, so how was your twin? You tell me that, twin? Her mom was like, so I'm like, so how you get named Kehinde? I said, because of that mommy over twins are called Taiwo and Kehinde. You don't call them names. Well, as in, and Taiwo is the one that born first. Kehinde is the one that born second. And Kehinde is the older one. So the one that born second is senior. That one stayed in a little longer and push up the other one. So because push up the other one, you're the senior. Of course, in our thinking, the one that born first is the older one. So you see, it changes. But the thing about the names is that we actually have been able to recover some of the names on Barbadian plantations. Like there was Pilgrim Plantation in Christchurch had a list. And you had people with names like the usual one, Kafi, Ojo. Now, Kafi is not an African name. Kafi is really a corruption of Kofi. So part of the thing is that we have these what look like African names, and then we have to try and work out what is the correct thing. But when we look at the names, the Akan names are very popular in the list, including the names of the girls. And I have to confess, I don't know the girls' names by heart. I know the boys' names, I just gave it. Right? But you'll find in the list, you're going to find as I said, you're going to find your Kafi, you're going to find your, and there's one that's Fiba, which is the girl's name, so a Friday-born girl, Fiba, right? P-H-I-B-B-A-H. It's a corruption, right? So, but then, at the same time, you also get names that suggest are coming from areas other than the Akan. So like, we come across people called Biafran names, people called Mango, Now, Biafra, I don't know for those of us who are old enough to remember the Nigerian Civil War in the 1960s. It was Nigeria versus Biafra. Right? Biafra is like eastern, southeastern Nigeria, where the Igbo and others come from. The Mongo, when you see references to like people being called Mongo, and you went to Mongo largely is the area Cameroon, when you're going towards Douala, from off the coast, up the river. So, the names give you some idea of where people come from, but they're not enough. We don't have a sufficient record to be able to say the names of the enslaved on the plantations all across Barbados for so many years consistent. And then, as I said, once we get to the 18th, 19th century, we start to convert the formerly enslaved and we change the names. Because we have, for example, the Moravian records, the records of the Moravian church in terms of baptism, and they do indicate the presence of African names. But it's not sufficient, because in most cases, what they give you is the baptized name, not the original name. So that's part of our problem. Right? Now, we can also try food. We look at food. Now, we do look a little differently in Barbados. And I think Barbados is the only place that is put everything in salt for bread. So that one is peculiar. Right? That one is peculiar. I'm not quite sure where it comes from. It's not an African thing. Not much I can tell you. But what we started doing, what we really need to do, is actually pay attention to like food. We may not eat the same foods, but when we look at some of the names, when we look at the way food is prepared, it gives us an idea. Now, unfortunately, most West African people, and even people from down Central Africa, when they prepare the food, they tend to prepare it in pound it, it comes in a nice little ball. So just like cocoa, precisely. So by looking at that, it doesn't tell you anything, because that's how most of them prepare, right? And I remember once trying to explain to somebody from Southern Africa about cocoa. And the person seems to be a little lost, because he used like many Africans, also many Africans cook wafers and things. They don't put them in the meal, they put them outside. Like how you do work is lost. Right? And I'm saying to him, the thing is that he's lost. So a fellow from Malawi who had lived in Trinidad and had been to Barbados looked at him and said, cocoa is like mealy with okras, but you add salt to make it sweet. And the fellow, of course, was even more confused. But I said, you can't use salt to make it sweet, especially from this kind of stuff. What he meant was you use salt to give it taste. Use salt to give it taste. So, but the idea is in terms of our preparation of food, while we can't say it is peculiar to one geographical area or one ethnic group, it is clearly African, things like cocoa. Then every November we make conkeys. Right? Now the closest thing to conky is kenke. Even the name is similar. Kenke is Ghanaian. Right? It's made with corn. But what they do, and they cook it in leaves. Whereas they would use like corn, we use bananas. But there's like one is the method, and we ours is sweet. Theirs is unsweetened, and they put fish with it. But if you just see kenke, you might think, hang on, let's compete. And we do have a Ghanaian student, postgraduate student at K-Phil, and he was telling me about 2 weeks ago that when he saw compete, the first thing that crossed his mind was kenke. Right? Now, Barbados is one of those areas, unfortunately, that we have not done proper research on food. And therefore, the area that probably offers us the best example or the best opportunity is linguistics. Language, words we use, how we speak. Alright? Now, in this regard, let me first say that Barbados lags behind the rest of the Caribbean in terms of linguistic research. Now, One of the possible explanations for this is the African religion. A lot of the early research that was done on African languages in the Caribbean and in the Americas looked at religion. So we know, for example, a lot about Yoruba language in Cuba because of the study of the Afro-Cuban religion, Santeria. We know, again from Cuba, we know about the Efi language, southeastern Nigeria towards Cameroon, because of Abaquar. Abaquar religion is an African religion that's practiced in Cuba. We know about Fon, the language of the people of Dahomey, West Africa, because of Vodun, studying Vodun in Haiti. So the early linguistic research in the Caribbean and the Americas was done by people who were investigating religious practices and trying to make sense of the African religions. And they had therefore to first do understand the African languages. Maybe because in Barbados we started Obeah so effectively, and the fact that Obeah remained illegal in this country until the 1990s. It was legal until the 1990s. That is why when it comes to Barbados, we don't have that extensive body of language research, right? But Dr. Alsop, the late Richard Alsop, started looking at language. And the thing about Alsop's research, limited though it was, is that it pointed clearly towards Igbo. And if Alsop argues, for example, that Bin, the word we use to describe Barbados, he says it's a corruption of the Igbo maiden, and his act, my house. And he says that essentially, when you look at the way Europeans speak, Europeans of this day is a corruption based on the way we speak now of what was African words. And then of course, when people put it and call Barbados Finishing. Anyway, we won't argue with that. What we can say is that when you look at Barbadian like speech patterns, we would say, you got any food there? You say the food that eat. Makes no sense in English. So in English you can't say the food that eat. Food doesn't do anything. Food is eaten. Food doesn't eat. You see? So Alsop says, what you're therefore studying are speech patterns. Even though we lost the words, we kept the patterns and the rhymes and the way you speak. Right? And there is that wonderful Bajan word when we say you plural, we hear one. So Igbo word, you make a different way, it was we have to one. That's what meaning more than one. Right? So also they say, look, go and do the research. Language is the way to go. Because, and this goes back to the argument that Kamau Rafiq made. Barbadians kept their African culture, they hid it. And in the process of hiding it, they lost certain parts of it that you maintain as structures, even if you don't always know words. Like something in school, you remember how things are done, if you can always remember the exact, so there's certain structures. And, the other thing would be that we've had a long history of contact with Africa. And then in the 19th century, we actually had Barbadians going back, and particularly in the 20th. Right? And it is like from those people that we also begin to get some idea of what Africa, what in Barbados reminded them of Africa. Now, one of the dangers in that is we have to take into account the fact that we have been enslaved by the Europeans, they have been colonized by the Europeans, and after a while, there are certain practices that are similar. We both go to church. Right? We both even though like you keep in African, like modern Africans, they will have their African name, but they'll also have like a Christian name or Muslim name or what have you. So it is actually getting more difficult. This is the funny thing. But the point I want to emphasize is that slave trade was a very difficult business. And what happens in slave trade is that most of the people who ended up in Barbados, they're brought against the will. They usually captured in war. Sometimes they're sold because of political reasons. You know, whenever you want to get rid of it, and you know, politicians have this wonderful way of dealing with their enemies. And one of the ways you can deal with your enemies was to ship them across the Atlantic quietly. Now, increasingly, we were looking more, I have to say Barbados is still behind in terms of doing research on its African heritage. We still lag behind the rest of the Caribbean. And I think part of it is because of that, having to fight this idea that we're English, not African. And that has played a major role in people trying to convince themselves that we're English, we're Afro-Saxons, we're Anglo, all sorts of things. Right? But, you know, you can't hide the fact that you're African by look like one, even though we ain't sure which one you look like. And in fact, we can argue that they look like us. That's what I used to tell them when I was there. No, you look like me, get wrong. I don't look like you. But it's just a tease them. And I will close there because I know you have questions, and I think I'd rather answer your questions than go on. Thank you.
I was asked if there is a scientific approach in filming ancestry.
Right now, what we have is more and more because we use the DNA testing, and it is supposed to be more advanced, but it has its flaws, right? In the sense that, I mean, let us just forget the long-term ancestry. Let's just take your hair. You have a father and a mother. And you have two grandparents on one side, two grandparents is 4. Right? And then you just start working down whose family to you just before them. It isn't the easiest thing in the world. And then when you go back, another generation, that's another 8. Right? So, what you end up with, as I said, is you get these approximations. So even though the DNA is supposed to be scientific, it still gives you approximation. It gives you guesses, right? And they will tell you, you might very well, somebody like you and I, we might very well hear that we are 90% white, 5% Akan, 3% Igbo, 0.25% Mandingo or something, right? Now, the question is, how do you determine it's 90% white? If, as Mrs. Assistant says, let's say you're half and half. Because you know there's some people whose may have very clear white heritage, white ancestry, but they've also got very clear black ancestry. So when, in fact, some of those people, when you do the DNA testing, they've been found to be actually 85% black. And you know, that's not possible. Right? So that's what I'm saying, it's approximation. I think the testing will obviously be refined. Over time, we are going to refine it. But for now, it is still largely guesswork. But the key thing about it, what I think is important about the DNA testing, at least even as flawed as it is now, is that it actually shows there's more than one. You see, or it's almost impossible that it will be a particular ethnic group that you are entering. And this is the case with Barbados. Now see, Cuba is a little different. Cuba and Brazil are a little different. And it has to do with the fact that Cuba and Brazil are like relatively latecomers to the transatlantic slave trade. And in the case of those two territories, we know that the black population comes into Cuba and Brazil largely after 1780. And in the period after 1780, and particularly after 1807, when the slave trade is quote unquote abolished, you have large exports from Yoruba land. So Brazil and Cuba are Yoruba, largely because of the timing in terms of when they are populated by Africans, and at that time, it's because you have a whole set of warfare in Yoruba land that the Yoruba are the dominant ethnic group in the transatlantic slave trade after 1780. And once you get to abolition, British abolition, 1807, the people who are being exported are Yoruba. So Cuba and Brazil, no problem. Right? Barbados is a little tricky. But see, the fact that even if you're born here, so let us say let's take a current thing, not even going back to the slavery period. Your father is Nigerian, your mother is Bajan, you're born in Barbados. What does that mean?
Both.
What does that make you?
Both. Because they look like that. My husband is Nigerian. My son born here, my daughter born here, so. But whenever they look like, for instance, his parents done, when he went back there, they said, my daughter didn't get anything. My son got a line and everything in Nigeria. But I'm saying that they must look at, I'm not sure from the comment, but they must look at male. They don't look at female.
Your husband from Benin?
He's from River State.
Okay. Ijo or Igbo?
I can't remember all these things. When he first meet, he sent me everything about Nigeria. He even had pictures of the African, the museum of the women. They have a museum for women, and we will see that on things with the lady Maria. No, I don't know. I was going there, but then when I see African movies, it scared me. No, I know he told me come.
Are you afraid that the word is spell on you? Is that what you're worried about? But no.
African movies, I was going there.
Okay,
and
now.
I was sick, and then when I see African movies, like really.
Okay, now then it raises an important point, which we'll tie back to my friend over here, Ghana. Now, what has happened is, you talk about family life. There's a whole big discussion about family life, about inheritance and everything. Because when you say, you gave your son, not your daughter, I asked it with Benin. Because Benin, like in the kingdom of Benin, and Benin to this day, only one child count, firstborn son. Nobody else exists. So you can, no, only one child is count, please. Now, what we have here in our system is, for the most part, women are heads of houses. Women are head of household in Barbados. Right? And some people have tried to trace it back to Africa. It doesn't work. It has to do with the peculiarities of the system down here. It has to do with the peculiarities of the fact that once you get past 1838, mostly men migrated. See, the initial migration was men, right? Rather than women. So the men go, leave the women behind. So the women have to take responsibility. And what people have tried to say is, could that possibly be a carryover from the African tradition? And what they then do is we start looking for places in Africa where women had influential roles. And one of the places where women had influential roles is actually Ashanti. Akan, you're Akan people. You see, what the Akan do, the Akan reckon descent. You know, you reckon your family on your mother's side, not on your father's. Right? Now, the Muslims the Muslim scholars used to make fun of it and say that the only reason, so wherever you see people doing matrilineal practices, counting things on the mother's side, they said the only reason they did that is because you were sure that the woman's child was a woman and they weren't sure it was a man. That was the Muslim explanation. Right? Maybe true, but what it means in practice, it doesn't mean in practice that women rule or that women inherit. What it means is when it comes to property, now if I'm in a patrilineal system, like if I'm in a Muslim system, I have children, I have a son, my son inherits. If I don't have a son, my brother inherits.
All that anybody would know.
Right? Yeah. Now, in the matrilineal system, it is not my son who inherits, it's my nephew, it's my sister's son to whom I pass my property. See, it's an unusual arrangement. So, like in the patrilineal or the biblical or the ancient Semitic schemes, my son or my brother. But in the Abrahamic system, the matrilineal system, my sister's son or my sister's grandson. Not my brother, not my son. That's how it's done. No, it's not. It's a recipe for murder if you're not familiar with it. But if you understand how it works, it's the system, right? Where the problem comes is when people try to tinker with the system, or when, as occasionally happens, it might be a situation where I have no children and no brother. Then there's a bit of a problem, right? Because even in Islam says, for example, that girls must inherit, daughters must inherit, as well as sons. But then it says, for every portion that the girl gets, the boy gets too. Right? So yeah, there's discrimination. But there are all sorts of practices. So people have started looking at our like family life. People have been looking at the fact that, to use a not too nice a term, but major memories. I can't agree. Right, anyway, what people have been trying to work out is how do you explain it? How do you explain the makeup of the Caribbean family? Is it an African family? To what extent are the social and the family practices African pretensions or Caribbean realities? Because people then start talking about polygamy, right? Well, technically polygamy, one man, many wives. Now we don't practice that one, man. I'm sorry, we don't practice that one. That will be the end of civilization. So basically, what people have said, because I've heard people in Barbados say, I have many women because I am an African. I've heard people say that. Or they will say, it's my culture. Right? Now, even when in the African cultures, as far as I know, the traditional culture, having many women and many wives was an economic thing. You see, women were responsible for agriculture. Why do you think when you look at the early slave imports, it's men who come down here and not women? See, the planters then had to specifically start saying, we want women. They said men. See, because the West African economies, they're largely agricultural. And women did the agricultural work. So if you ship off all the women, you'll be basically, killing off yourself. You can lose the men. Right? No, in the context of West, you can lose the men because the roles of the women are important, they're economically important. And that was the fundamental reason. There was a link between agriculture and marriage.
So we are avoiding a civilization here.
Unfortunately.
I said, here, there's so many men, and more women, and you have to service all these people, so we can't stop that.
No, I think it is something, we always react to what exists, what is the reality, right? And everything. Sometimes, it raises important questions on morality. What is right, what is wrong? But sometimes it is like, this is the real world, this is what is it, this is what we do. But sometimes also, we also know that things are wrong. And then we look for all kinds of reasons to explain them and justify them.
Wrong, but by whose standards?
That is also true, because, well, yeah, but there's a sense in which, if you're claiming to be African, then you have to try and understand what the Africans did, or what was the basis for why the Africans did things. Right? Now, part of there's this discussion of reparations, right? CARICOM has, I think, a 10-point reparations plan. And one of the points in there says, as part of the reparations process, if African descendants in the Caribbean want to go back to Africa and live, they should be encouraged. But there should be a program of education put in place to prepare them for going back there. Now, you look on TV, you watch your African movies, right? And the combination of two things. On the one hand, you get, the tug between the traditional culture and the modern culture, right? Or you get this thing that, they're so westernized. And so they look like us. They behave like us. They dress like us. They have the same names. See, because partly it is they've been conquered, they've been colonized. Right? But the Africa that we came from is not necessarily the Africa that exists today. You see? And therefore, while I have no problem with people going back, and I wish my friend had gone back to her state, gone to Port Harcourt, get some good pepper fish soup. And I think if you've gone to Port Harcourt and you had your pepper soup, you'll keep going back. Right? But see that the Africa that we left has changed. It was changing when we were leaving, in the sense that the transatlantic slave trade was undermining certain institutions. Take for example religion. Most of those African communities are underpinned by religion. Alright? But you had a case, and this applied to the Igbo, and that is why you see there were so many Igbo in the transatlantic slave trade. See, because among the Igbo, you had this peculiar arrangement among the Aro. The Aro were one of the subgroups of the Igbo. And the Aro were controlled by traders. The traders were also priests. So what happened in practice was they controlled the oracle, what they call the long juju or Arujuku, as priests. So what they did as priests, they used their religious role to find people to sell across the Atlantic as traders. So what you would do, for example, is you would say in the 1780s that, there's a plague in the land, everything, we're not living in harmony with our gods and the deities and the ancestors, and we need to sacrifice people. Because if you read history of the Igbo, shows that towards the end of the transatlantic slave trade, sacrifice is becoming more and more a feature of society. Except the people weren't being sacrificed in the sense that when they sacrificed, they were ending up here. Right? So you use, as a priest, you were supposed to use that role as priest to do what is in the community's best interest, not your own personal interest. So the desire to make profit of the transatlantic slave trade conflicted with the duty to the community as priests. And unfortunately, the trader role won out over the religious role. So in a sense like that, the place is already being corrupted, even at 10-year leaving. And then, Europeans have come in, since the 1890s, have taken over the place. The missionaries have come in. How many people here watch any of these Nigerian evangelists on television? Because we have some of the richest pastors in the world are in Africa. We have most of them in Nigeria. And we create, well, you already retired, I don't know if you start your own church. But what the fellas do is, it's like an interpretation of Christianity. And of course, Christianity has many interpretations. And not just between Catholics and Protestants, but even within the Protestant faith, the Anglicans say one thing, and the Baptists say something else, and the Baptists say something else. So the fellas are using the religion, like preying on the fact that the people are traditionally religious. That you grew up in a community in which there is, recognition of the role of the supernatural. But then they're corrupted. I don't know if you ever watch any of the videos or anything, but you see the fellas sometimes, the fellas got something a little bit cool. And they pour it over the people ahead and call it, well, we don't know what holy water. They write magic spray and all magic water and all kind of things that cast up demons and enrich people. So basically what you have is you can corrupt your own institutions, but you can also corrupt other people's institutions. Basically, we are corrupt people. We find all, which is why we need priests. But the only problem comes when the priests are corrupt. I think they are a real problem. No, they come, then you have a real problem because in the communities, and I mean the Africans took we adopted Christianity over here. Africans readily adopted Christianity, most of them. There were some cases where, you opposed the missionaries because the missionaries came in and they challenged things like the killing of twins, they challenged polygamy, forced marriage, bride price. So fellas said, I'm going to go from around here, you're talking nonsense. But there are other places where you embrace the missionaries, precisely because the missionaries bring education. You see, and that was the key thing. There was a close link. Once the European missionaries came, the Christian missionaries came, there was a close link between education and Christianity. So we went to church to go to school. So when we went to church and said to go to school. So in church, we kept our African thinking. And basically, we then started to borrow, pick from Christianity, right? What we could use. And that process was continued now, where you have like these African churches, which are supposed to be a convent, which are supposed to be rooted in African religious traditions, but they're following Christian precepts and principles. So that has continued. And religion is one of those areas, that, you do associate Africans with. They're very religious people. And it hasn't always happened. Yes, please.
Several times tonight you said you're behind in terms of research. I know you teach at the tertiary level. What are your views on how our educational system, if it has been able to inform or make our population aware of the influence of Africa on Barbados?
All right. For the most part, our educational system over the years has been designed not to educate us about Africa. Right? There have been important exceptions. But in the last 50 years or so, there's been pressure. You've had the Black Power movement, you've had your Back to Africa movement, you have the influence of the Rastas, you have greater travel by Barbadians. We've gone to Nigeria and Africa and gotten married, as our friend here has done. But basically, there's been greater exposure to Africa. And certainly in the last 30 years or so, in Barbados, we have responded. Now, I remember in the early 70s, there was an attempt at Queen's College. by the late Dr. Elsie Payne to actually teach Africa. And it was not the first time anybody had taught Africa in Barbadian school, right? And her argument was, it was wrong for people to go to what was supposed to be a school. And at the end of 8-9 years of schooling, you don't know anything about half the world. In other words, you don't know anything about Asia, you don't know anything about Africa. So she introduced this like world history, where she taught Africa, right? But then in the 1990s in particular, there were attempts to actually formally teach Africa in the school. There was a plan to introduce African studies. Right? There was a little debate at first about whether what Black studies, African studies. They settled on African studies. People were meeting to drop the syllabus and everything. For a variety of reasons, that thing didn't work out. Because one of the schools that had been targeted for was the garrison. There was no grade in C. So, and they were going to, I think there were 5 schools. There was this in Masonburg. There were 3 secondary and there were 2 primary. And the idea was to roll it out, use them as test cases and then bring it in. But as I said, that didn't get very far. Even when we had a commission for Pan-African Affairs, the persons who controlled the commission were more interested in trade than in education. And then, of course, the commission has fallen by the wayside. What we do in the department at PFL is that individual members of staff go into schools, then invited to talk to students. But what we started doing now is actually bringing the students and teachers for workshops. But even then, it's limited, are we looking at 11K thing. So, at the same time though, the Caribbean Examinations Council, a few years ago, they set up a committee to investigate why the numbers in people doing history at CXC, at CSET level had fallen. And it was chaired by Professor Alan Cobley, who's a professor of South African history at PFL. And he submitted a report which has gone to all the ministries of education. I am not sure what our ministry has decided, but part of that, part of the recommendation was the need to teach history, including African history, to children in schools, including primary schools. So that plan was basically to overhaul the system. Now, a big part of our education, unfortunately, has been about entrenching European values and values. Right? And every now and then, you'll see it flaring up. You'll get like a couple of years ago, maybe last year before, at Harrison College, you get children being sent home for to learn natural hair. I mean, the idea that in this day and age you should think of something, it says a lot about us in terms of how far we have gone. Right? But, I think there is, one of the things about February, I have my reservations personally about African Awareness Month. I think we should have African Awareness Year. Right? In other words, it shouldn't be something we do for 28 days and then the other 330, we forget all about it. Right?
It's this year.
Well, stand up to journey. So, I have my reservations, but at the same time, it is better than nothing, one. And two, there is, the students look forward to it. I sometimes when you talk to the parents, but they'll come and tell you, a friend of mine, her son is grade C, and she's asking me about kente cloth, about how it is to be worn and which is the correct one. And so, there's that kind of awareness in the schools. So there's hope, right? There's hope. But then at the same time, there's there are the other challenges and the other pressures. Right? But we haven't done as well as we ought to. And I mean, like, because I went to the House Boys to teach a class because they didn't teach in the sixth form. We've introduced all kinds of things in K for Africa without preparing the teachers for it. So the teachers will come and say, I need you to come and teach this. And you go and meet there may be 5 students doing history, but you got 10 saying no, because the other 5 weren't here. So I mean, in that sense, there's progress. And see, this is the thing about the youth. I mean, we can custom all we want, but that's where the pressure usually comes from. See, and to go back to your question, Leroy, that's one of the problems where Africa stagnated so much. Because when you, 400 years, 300-400 years consistently, you are sending your youngest and brightest and best, you're going to stagnate, you're going to go backwards. And, it's a good sign that we're doing it. The children very much look forward to wearing their African clothes, even if the parents don't want it, but the children very much. And I'm thinking that let's do it for 12 months a year. And then another year, instead of just doing it for 1 month.
There's a need for television to be more active during this month of African awareness.
Well, I mean, television to be active depends on a whole set of things. It depends on what material television has. Because I know there are lots of youngsters that go on the internet and find them on YouTube, you go to different websites and find things. Right? Now, it depends on what your priorities are. If your priorities can come, right? Or if your priority is Barbados, then CARICOM, then the West, then it doesn't matter, the TV station is going to follow. Now, I see the Prime Minister has recently invited, we've had the President of Ghana, we've had the President of Kenya here, the Prime Minister went to both, where there's talk about opening an embassy somewhere, nobody's quite sure where, how many. But you don't know how long, whether it will be sustained. Now, one of the things that has changed is that on the African side, there's a greater interest in black people in this part of the world. So that when the African Union was created, about 20 years ago, what they did was they talked about West Africa, North Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, South Africa, East Africa, and the diaspora. So officially, according to the African Union, we are part of Africa. So there's now that reaching out from their side as well. I mean, you go back to the 70s, when Barrow was Prime Minister, Barrow in Kenya, we had the head of state of Nigeria, we had Zambia, we had Botswana, we had Lesotho, Haile Selassie passed through briefly, but I mean, and then what happened afterwards? It just fizzled out. In fact, I remember when Tom Adams became Prime Minister, one of the arguments Tom made of not living in Cologne, he said was that Barrow had brought the fellow from Lesotho to work over there to make sure that if he had to run the farm, he was there. Right? Now, and he said that with a smirk, but what he did also say was that Lesotho, the fellow had to stage the coup, and he had not, so Barrow had to bring him here since you were supposed democracy, and that Barrow had brought him here to make sure Barrow didn't lose the elections. Right? Now, of course, you remember when Barrow lost in 76, the late Burnham asked him, how could anybody in power for 15 years get me? Right? But essentially, there is, on the African side, a greater awareness, and it has to do with a lot of that, like people who study West Indians and Africans meeting up in England, meeting up in the States, in Canada, where they're studying, they're working. So there's hope. But I think if we rely on government alone, it's not going to go anywhere. Because government has its priorities. You're going to look at the fate of the Commission on Pan-African Affairs to see it doesn't exist anymore. It was up in a huff, and we had all this talk and its front pages on TV all the time, and then there's no more commission. So in about 20 years, you created and killed off the commission. So I'm thinking if you're going to, in terms of links with Africa, knowledge of Africa, it has to be like unofficial. There's going to be people, there's going to be institutions, and then who would tell you?
I think you can start from so I think you said a very key join Africa but you want to continue from there. Okay.
Yeah, and as I said, but that of course would require, well, to make it fully functional and effective, it requires a curriculum overhaul, right? But even without an overhaul, there are ways you can tinker with it to fit it in, if you want to, right? And I know, going back to the African Studies program that was being drawn up in the 90s, because the idea was, if you could, for example, if you're teaching art, for example, something art, you could bring in African art in there. But you also recognize that if that was the way you did it, in a kind of piecemeal way, but in a little piece here, a little piece there, you're going to lose the effectiveness and the thrust of the initiative. So I think, yes, government clearly will have to, the Ministry of Education will have to lay down the guidelines, and yes, we'll have to start in the primary schools. And as I said, those youngsters look forward to wearing the pretty African clothes. And I mean, for some of them, it's more than that. They actually, when you talk to some of those, because I remember last year, I was by St. Luke's Brighton. And I did the chat at St. Luke's Brighton, right? And some of the questions they were asking me, I was like, oh, you know that? I was genuinely impressed, right? So there is that awareness, and I think it's a question of trying to sustain.
So you can play a physical role in that.
I don't think so. I think there are certain people who will have nothing to do with it. Partly because, you see, what we do, we tend to politicize these things. No. We're all political, but I am not going to join something that says, this is what this party. See, it's not about party anymore. We talk about education to children. So it can't be. Yes, a party will claim credit for it. After all, one party keeps claiming credit for free education all the time. So yes, you will claim credit for it. I have a problem with that. But what I have a problem with is where you pick people on political allegiance rather than expertise. And then you hear all sorts of nonsense being spoken. And then if you try to say anything, they say you belong to the other party. No, I mean that initiative I talked about in the 1990s had nobody from you was on it. Initially, because I spoke to Ms. Bell, Warner Bell, about it at one point, because I was trying to do a paper on teaching African history, teaching African in Barbados. So I interviewed her, and she was telling me, and I said, this is the first time I'm hearing about some of these initiatives. And she said, that's because y'all wouldn't join. So I went back to the office, and when I spoke to Coffee, who was then head of the department, he told me, no, he was invited. But they told him about the meeting day after the meeting. But they invited him to the next one. He told them he was going to be out of the country on university business. Keep him informed. They did not maintain the contact. So then what he did then, he wrote them and said, he's even busier now because he's head of the department, he's this, the next, and the third. And we recommend that Richard Goodridge, play that. And that was the end of it. And I think it was Reverend Johnson who blocked me. Well, he was the Prime Minister's advisor on this. But no, it is something that, you look at the population. The population is black. I mean, you're talking about teaching Barbadian history. You cannot teach Barbadian history without teaching African history. It will not make sense. Right? So while it is necessary to teach Barbadian history, and incidentally, we in the department we have as part of the gathering, the department decided to join the gathering, and every month there will be a history of the parish. Whichever parish is being celebrated, there will be a lecture on the history of the parish, and I think you were approached about, I don't think it's going to be held here, but I think they're going to use the parish church. I'm almost certain that's where they're going to use the name. But the idea is that every month somebody will do a lecture on the history of the parish. Right? I mean, yes, it's useful, but when you start, let's say go back to 16, as we like to do 1639, or whenever. Right? What happens in 1639? If you're going to teach that, you're going to be teaching European history, unless you're saying, in order to properly understand slave rebellion, let's take like slave rebellion, because they're about slave rebellions without understanding why they happened. Right? And initially, you look at in Caribbean history, the idea used to be the slaves rebelled, but the conditions were hard, the conditions were brutal. It is true. But the part they had ignored was in Africa, men did not do agricultural work. You put the men to do women work down here, the men is like rebellion. You see, so that's part of the explanation. It may not be the explanation, but if you try to explain, especially that 17th century Barbadian history, without reference to Africa, it will make no sense. And I think we're beginning to recognize that. But as I said, we are, because in Barbados, we focus on sugar revolution, and from sugar revolution, we start talking about Samuel Jackson Prescott, and our national heroes and all kinds of things. We've not properly sat down and looked at it and, the way it should be done. And we'll get there. Yes, sir.
Right, thanks very much. You struck a chord with me when you asked, when you were talking about the dress. Someone was so excited about the time to ask you what kind of clothing or apparel or whatever it was. My mind went back to Sunday at St. Luke, where we invited the members of the congregation to come in some type of African wear. But now you're saying that they were asking what type. So I wonder if you can say a little bit, because when I first thought about this, and I guess the day of pre-stopping in his house, my wife decided that she wanted to get in the action and had me all over Canada. Then we ended up at bed. She's here, so. And I just said to her, well, which do you like? So I'm wondering, and then one other female, Deacon Suzette, was asking me about vestments, and I said, well, I'm not sure what to wear. So perhaps if you can say a little more about that, by the time we get around to the color schemes and whatever, and Rosie will be able now to, because Rosie also had some cloth around the church.
And I can't say too,
So if you can say a little bit more about that, perhaps we could do a better job in terms of representing
Perhaps we could get your wife to answer first before you answer that. Don't say the wrong way. No. Clothes. Clothes are important, right? And because dress in Africa is important, and we dress according to the occasion, right? And colors and things depend, it varies from society to society. Now, if you take, for example, kente cloth. You look at kente cloth, it's largely yellow, it's red, it's green. Right? Could be wrong, but I think those are the three main colors. Did they cut that? Yeah, but because the baby ones you see clearly can stand out. You know, kente was made. Kente was made initially. People imported cloth from Europe. And they pick it down and then put it back in a different design. See, that's how kente came up, right? Because it has to do, and if you look at kente, there are actually different patterns. Some is like a finer one, then there's one with bigger squares. So it depends on who you are, right? Person in Barbados, we can wear which one we want. Right. And no, but I'm saying in a way, I got no problem with it. Right? Because sometimes you'll be challenging certain like elitist notions about dress. Right? And in fact, actually that reminded me of something I should have said but didn't say. One of the areas that we've not looked at is dress and like head ties. Women wear head ties. And then if you see an African woman, a fully dressed African woman, her head is tied. Fully dressed African, I mean nowadays, because in the early days of European rule, the Europeans used to put all these nasty little comments in the literature. And there was one fella, he was an anthropologist, famous anthropologist, CKB, and he was referring to the women down in the Mambela Plateau in Nigeria, Cameroon border. And he said the Mambela ladies went in full dress, wear a freshly plucked bunch of leaves in front and one behind. Right? And that was his description. But yet, you see other people will talk about the cloth they wear, whether it is a raffia, you know, it's made from Nepal. You can have, for example, like among the Yoruba ashoke, which costs a fortune, and which is supposed to be worn, quote unquote, by nobles and on very special occasions. So, I mean, it's not a simple thing of saying we should make them wear this rather than that. Because this might be what we're saying, wear this but not that. That might be useful and that might be correct in another environment. Right? So if you look, for example, just say like this. This is normally worn by people across the savanna regions of West Africa. Right? And part of it, of course, is its protection against the dust. Right? You hear me talk about Sahara dust. And then next time you see people, you see like some of the men, like the Tuareg and so, they always wear turbans and they usually have their face covered. And they don't have their face covered because they're terrorists trying to hide. They have their face covered because they're trying to keep the dust out their eyes and that kind of thing. Right? So some of the dress would be like specific and appropriate to a particular environment, but not necessarily us, you see. But my own take on it is we should not discourage people by trying to be precise. Because even when we say we're being precise, I mean, I might be telling you, in Igbo land, we don't wear clothes like that. We don't wear them that way. But you might wear them like that somewhere else, you see? And because it's a range of cultures and communities across Africa, makes it difficult to say this is the authentic or this is the only. So it goes from ethnic group to ethnic group. And within ethnic group, the dress is going to be determined by what's your status. Do you belong to royalty? Do you belong to the nobility? But we still have that foolishness. do you, you know, it also has to do with wealth status in terms of like modern wealth and that kind of thing. It may be office, but what I know is that when you look at the altars and the, you know, you look in the church, we are more and more we're trying to make Jesus look like us, rather than like how we used to look all along. You know? Since we made in the image of God, the image must look like us more and more. You'll find that when the fellas have on the different vestments, there are all sorts of like trimmings of the African patterns and designs, and so I mean we keep the basic, you know, color and whatever, but then we start saying that the trimming is indicative of the place where you are. Because colors, I mean Africans like a lot of bright colors. Right? But what you'll find is that like women tend to wear brighter colors than men. And that kind of thing. So it is not as easy as saying, next year I'm going to tell the people Mr. Luke what to wear. Right? All I would simply say, you know, you wear what you have. And you wear what you're comfortable in. Because as I said, you know, I might be familiar with one ethnic group, you know, I might be more familiar with the culture and patterns of one ethnic group than another. And then, you know, like, what you find is that when you have occasions, ceremonies, birth, naming ceremonies, marriage, wedding, death, that kind of thing, there's a whole ritual in terms of clothes. Because you will go to the church, you know, you actually get married, and you know, like how our women get married next to Hong Kong, like that. By the time you get to the reception, you've taken those off, you're in African attire, and most of the bride's friends will have on the same cloth, but with all the material. And they will say, to commemorate the wedding of, you know, Sunday and King Day, and we'll have pictures of the couple, and that will be in the cloth. Or like if the Archbishop comes or the Pope, so we can make sure that you can make specific dress for occasions. And I mean, you wear them afterwards, of course, but they're really meant to be worn on that occasion. In the same way you're going to make like trays and glasses and everything. The images of the couple and things, those are more the souvenirs. The dress is meant to be like on that day we identify with the bride or we identify with whoever is celebrating or mourning or what have you. So it's not that there is a particular dress code, and it varies.
Thank you very much for that, but half thanks because it has some economic implications now, because you're telling my wife what you can choose large or wide.
I don't think I will have to tell her that. I think she already knows that.
But what the other side of it too, anything about funeral practices? I mean, do you see how we go about funerals in Barbados? Is there any connections at all, or were, or?
Well, we're different. The important differences, let me put it that way. In the sense that, and again, it depends, same way you have differences here, according to how much money you have. You know, let's get wonderful college, beautiful place. If you are over here, where now is swinging, cost a whole lot of money, and have to have a headstone. So, ain't that even bigger, you have to have a headstone. That's the agreement. In the gardens, that side and that side, you put back a wall. And then up there by the road with the water settle, you put cross. So, I mean, even within that, so you have those kind of variations because changes in status. Now, what happened is, when we look at some of the research in Barbados, one of the things that we look at is the direction you place the body. Which direction is the head facing? Right? does that suggest Islam and Islamic influence? Also, because there's also the Western Muslims to be considered. Then I got Newton. You know, we've wasted Newton, the burial ground of Newton. Newton was the first slave cemetery excavated in the Caribbean, in the English-speaking Caribbean. And all we do, you never know there's a cemetery there. You got factories, you have 3 factories, they have that 3 bush, and then government has put up a sign. And nobody's really aware of the significance of it. This fellow Jerry Handler, who excavated the site in the 70s, what Handler found was that you look at the way people were buried, indicated their status and their profession. So you look and see like what ornaments or so you put in the person's coffin. Right? You mean like in terms of the lodge. For the people here who belong to the lodge, I mean there's certain vestments that they wear and you put on them when they're going to be buried. I discovered that a couple of years ago in Goodridge now. And but it's the same thing with in the slavery period. What you'll find is that when you look at things like pipes, the existence of pipes in the coffin, in the burial mound, you look at do you have like medicine bags to suggest the person is like a priest? What we call Borbia man. Remember, Borbia is both medicine and religion. And so you look at those sorts of things. There's of course the celebration after the burial, but what you get is that like nowadays I die, I go to St. Luke's and bury as the end of that. But for them, you just have like first burial, and then it's got like final burial the year after, like final burial ceremonies and that. So I mean, we don't follow those. At least if we do, I'm not aware. Then there's also the thing about like, you go to the rum shop, and you always see the old men throw the libation. But the funny thing is, years ago, we had, there was a Nigerian here, and he said it wasn't African, that Africans don't do it. And I thought the man was crazy. Right? And the next, so I pointed out to him all sorts of evidence of it being done. And he said, oh, well, many people, we are Christians, and now we don't do that. You fellas always pour something for the ancestors. And that is something we continue to do. Even though we might just do it without realizing the full significance, or what we do it without really needing it, you see, but we still do it. And so those are the kinds of things, because in Africa, religion was the center of life. See, religion was the center of life. You're going to farming, you have to have prayers before the harvest starts. You'll sacrifice some people to the gods, to please the gods, so we get rain. We pray we don't get enough rain, and we pray we don't get too little rain. And before the harvest is hauled in, we have religious ceremonies. After the harvest is finished, we have a feast. We have all kinds of annual religious festivals. So religion remains central to African life. I mean, it is done in our part of the world like different ways. We have harvest every year, right? The church has harvest every lot, right? So we do it, we link it, and because most communities, the whole thing is about you have to live not so much in harmony with nature, but in harmony with God. See? And what you see, like for them, pestilence, disease, then means you're doing something wrong. So let's take the mask. Now when we think of mask, everything can be right. And we think of the mobile jumping fellas, step walkers, fellas walking on steps. But those in Africa, those fellas had an important function. And it was basically that annually you'll have these religious festivals. where, we're recommitting our community to live with the ancestors, with the deities, live the right way. And you get these people going around. So that's why they wore masks, because you weren't supposed to know who it was behind the thing. So they go around and they call out people, not necessarily shaming, but the idea is there are people in this community who are not doing the right thing, who are not living the right way. And the ancestors and the gods are angry. Right? In politics, you can't say we're religion or politics. Even in our system, you have a chapter in the parliament. I ain't quite sure if it has any effect on you because they're right? But you have that link between religion and politics. So let's take the Yoruba, right? The ones I talk about, we say you can see them clearly in Cuba and Brazil. The Yoruba, at least the Oyo Yoruba, had a formula for getting rid of the king. No. He will take care of it eventually. So we have a formula, right? Basically, like when there's, you can have one bad harvest, but 2 straight bad harvests, the king can't be doing a good job. Right? So essentially, what we do then, we have the king that he rules in conjunction with the council. And the council are nobles, we can't get rid of them. See, that's the whole idea. See, they're the ones who check this power. Because the Oyo Yoruba had this brilliant idea that you'll make the king an absolute ruler. So when you greeted him, you didn't just say, "Morning, king, how are you?" You greeted him when you go stand here, you do your prostration, and you say, "Kia being cozy." There is no challenging your authority. That's how you greeted him. And then you made sure you challenge his authority. Right? No. See, if you give a man absolute power, he can use it. So you give him absolute power to help him rule, but then you put people there to bring him back. And if he ain't want to come back, you simply go to the priest. And the priest will consult the deities and the ancestors and you'll get an answer. And when we get that answer, the leader of the council goes to the king. And he says, the gods reject you. The earth rejects you. The people reject you. And then he leaves, and when he leaves, he puts a calabash by the door. And when he puts a calabash by the door, the king knows he used to be the king. That calabash meant you were going to commit suicide. See, that's the really thing. No, you ain't coming back. See, that's the whole idea. You're not coming back because you have polluted the earth. You are no longer in harmony with the deities who control here. So you can't come back. That's the whole idea. You go. We find somebody else who will. Of course, the system could give you. It's a political system. No, the calabash means you have to commit suicide. And carry your son with you too. And what? No, hold on that. And then what we also did. See, the fellas are smart, You don't only have your religion, you have the kingship, and there are like 3 or 4 royal lineages, I can't remember, but it used to rotate. So if it is lineage A, so I come from lineage A, I'm the king. When I die, it passes to lineage B. So if anybody in my family gets foolish enough to remove me, they still can't come forward. Because it goes to lineage B. So you guarantee stability. But that whole system then depends on religion to make it function. That's the only way the system works. Yes, but we will not give priests here that power. Because we might end up with a bishop who's also prime minister. Those days are over. I mean, it used to be in the medieval time, the priests used to run the country, but those days are over.
So you said that the king has to take his son with him. If he had 14 sons.
No, he carries first son. And the other thing is, for those who, many soldiers here, see, Oyo, see, the thing about Oyo was the most powerful of all the West African states in the 18th century. And one of the reasons why Oyo was so powerful and successful was its military. Right? Now what they also did, the Yoruba had this idea. The commander of the army could not live in the same place as the king. So the king lives in the capital, the commander lives out in the bush. And when you have a war to fight, you send for him. And you say, boss man, those people over there giving us trouble, go and deal with them. And he went and he dealt with them. And he brought back the booty. And when he took the booty back to the king gave them some, now go back to your bush and stay. If he did not win, he did not come back. Yes. So in other words, it's about finding ways of making people effective. And essentially, what is the ultimate price to save? Your life. That's the ultimate sacrifice. So if you want to be a successful military commander, so if you want to live, you want to be a successful military commander. So the idea is that, and even then as a military commander, you also perform religious rituals before embarking on battle. And those who decided that they trusted their own brilliance and their own military strategy and tactics and didn't perform the correct rituals, they find that when they didn't win, they knew what to do. So the whole idea is that if you're going to, and this is like one of the problems when we look at things that we have a difficulty with dealing with things like obey, because we've been so terrorized about the thing. You know, it's supposed to be worse than the word obey man. And the only thing worse than obey man is our man is in George. But essentially, no, not all. Am I right, Mr. Walker? Then we have at least one up Newberry. I can't go to Newberry, you ain't getting me off. Didn't we have one in Newberry who was supposed to be a heart man, who was not a obey man? I grew up in St. George, that's racist. But no, the whole thing is that, you see, we have looked at these things and we sometimes like look down on non-white people when they have religious things. Because the obey man, he's essentially a religious leader, but he's essentially a doctor, he's a health person. So he has to know the correct herbs and everything, obviously the correct book to use. Right? You know, nowadays, of course, we're going back to book and come back to the book and talk some foolishness before you do that. Fellow said years ago, he gave this story about how the fact that nowadays we are, in the olden days we use bush. Nowadays we use bush, but we don't call it bush. We say we got herbal, and we got natural. And it is backed by an advertising campaign that turned into a multi-billion-dollar industry. So this old man decided to cash in on his grades. My man took some stool, cut it up in small pieces, dried them, and advertised it as miracle tablets that will cleanse the inside, make it delicate, and preserve the memory. And this old woman took a dose, vomited, and I said, yeah, cleansing inside. And the woman said, I taste like shit though. The man said, yeah, like, you know what? You never eat stone. The big person that's getting all the lid. The man said, memory preserve. And he essentially, right, when you get the obey man, or what do we call him, the shaman, the priest, he combines a knowledge of religious rituals with a knowledge of botany. He has to know which herbs to use, which ones will cure a headache, which one will cure the swell foot, which one will help your back foot, and that kind of thing, right? And we look at it and we tend to sort of like look down on it and criticize it. Yet we go to the doctor and the doctor says, your recovery will be speeded up if you believe. You see, so in our system, we think it is normal, but when other people do it, we somehow criticize it. And that, we don't look at what is there. We look at like an image that has been presented. And that's what I'm saying, that however you turn, see, so religion comes across in everything. As it used to in our
Was
system.
very question, we have priests, oversee had extra powers. You know what you
Let us say that a lot of it is faith, right? It comes down to personal faith. And there are some people who are good at convincing us that they can do things. Like some priests become faith healers and others don't. Right? As far as I know, kind of lost without a faith healer. But he's supposed to be. But what I'm saying is we will flock to the park. We hear somebody performing miracles. Right? That, you know, but in a way, part of it is that, you see, and that's why I say we've never completely lost the African culture. You see, it's still there. So when we see people doing certain things, now they head us, they see that man, don't go near that man house. Or something. But it has, in a way, as I said, when you see those things, for me, those are, that's evidence that we still have the African, it hasn't been completely eroded. And as I said, sometimes we may not recognize, we do the things without, you know, sometimes we go to church and we just follow the ritual because we've been doing it for 10 years. But we don't really think about what we're saying. We don't think about what we're doing. Do we really believe what we're saying? Right? But we do it. And something like, it's there and it's part of it after life. And you know, there are things in there, like you talk about, because you said belief systems, and so you can't force belief out of people. You can get up and you can tell them that it's wrong, this should be this, but you don't know when the person goes from in front of you what he or she thinks and does. So yeah, that is important. Right? But everyone said it was over there.
Alright, I haven't seen any more hand or any information.
I just have one question.
Yes, sir.
What can you tell us about the African education system as compared to what we have now?
Well,
just supposing that because in England years ago, people from the West Indies and Africa were seen as sort of backward, very stupid. But all the Africans that I encountered, they excel and were way ahead of the English, for instance, and that still seems to dominate education.
Okay, there are different education systems. The one you are talking about is that the formal Western education system. And in many ways, it followed ours. A lot of the early work is done by the church, by the missionaries. We don't have universities. We will have, like in West Africa, there was Four Bay College, which is like equivalent to Cardinal College, except Four Bay became a full university in the end. Right? We set up what were like religious, you got your higher education in a religious institution. And then in 1948, well, after the war, the Europeans started expanding Western education in Africa. We had, in case of the British, since we talked about England, they set up universities in 1948, the same time as UE, right? 1948 is when the British gave us universities. And Harvard has been in existence since 1636, right? It took another 300 years before you brought education to the black colonies. Right? Now, what we now have across West Africa is a real expansion in education. especially university education, because we have a lot of private universities. Using Nigeria as an example, the federal government decided in every state of the federation there must be a federal university, but now they can't fund them. And every year the electorate on strike. And I don't mean that KFL really say, man, you don't pay me, keep noise, and then keep quiet and go on. My fellows don't go work for a year. Right? But so in terms of that, like formal Western system, it is expanded. A lot of it now is like private education. I mean, some of the private universities are good. And in Nigeria, we have quite a few religious universities. I don't just mean, like, say, like run by the Catholic or the Anglican, like major denominations. But I'm talking about like these church, like the Redeemed Church. Redeemed, have Redeemers University and that kind of thing. As you said, the Africans are quite good. Well, and naturally they're good. I mean, we are Africans when we pray. At least we think so. But that formal Western education system is also, because as I mentioned, the financial pressures, but it's also come under pressure from people who want to like scale back some of the westernization that is taking place. And this could be like Africans themselves, not like people who figure out you're a little too white and a little too Christian for my liking. We need to have a little more of our traditional culture respected. But there's also the pressure from Islam. And usually whenever you talk about religious fundamentalism, Islamic religious fundamentalism, one of the areas they target is Western education. Maybe one that you probably hear about in the news, Boko Haram. Right? I mean, the term Boko Haram, education is forbidden. Education is bad, haram. Right? So Boko, schooling, book work, haram, forbidden. Rather than, if they supported it, they would have called themselves Boko Halal. Right? Rather than Boko Haram. So there's that pressure from the Muslim space. And part of it is that there's long been, once you had Western education, see, it wasn't just about schoolwork, it was about Western culture as well. So for the Muslims, that was always a difficulty. Can I get Western education without compromising my Islamic religious beliefs? Right? And we still have the various, like the mosque remains a center of education across African states, but that is more like teaching people about the Quran, learning the Quran, learning the basic precepts of Islam, etc. And in many cases you learn by rote, because not everybody can read. So you learn to say the prayers by heart, but you can't necessarily read them. Right? There's that one. But there's also the more formal, higher Islamic education, where you set up like Islamic colleges. Egypt would be one of the leading places for this, though it's also emerging in West Africa. And then there's the traditional education, which has always been there. And that traditional education, and women are responsible for that, for the most part. Right? And it's about basically teaching children, the culture. Teaching them right from wrong, morals, values, but also a little bit of like what we would call elementary education. But the thing about that is that it is conducted in the African language, whereas the others they're taught in either English or French, or if it could be Arabic if it's a Muslim university. But part of the problem why you would have had that idea that the Africans in Western nations do right, yet they excel. They weren't given a chance. And the assumption was they were stupid. And you had to say they were stupid in order to justify doing what you've done to them. So like, yes, slave trade, you have to say they're animals, you have to say they're incapable of becoming Christians and that kind of thing in order to justify and legitimate what you have done. And then as the world changes, as the world keeps changing in terms of values and views, then somebody decided, you got to do something about them. You can't leave them as animals, you know. And then you start sending them to school, and you actually realize that they're right for you, you know. And because the universities in Africa, I mean, they're well-rated universities. All right, let me therefore say, since Father Watson is coming up, let me just say thank you for putting up with me, and at least I didn't hear anybody snoring.
Dr. Goodridge. On behalf of Dr. Watson, the entire group here, I want to thank you for your lecture. We are found to be interesting, inspiring, educational, okay, and exciting. Correct. Do you know that you were spoken almost 2.5 hours and no pricing board? I can assure you that I apologize for the small things. I can assure you that it's being recorded, and since people will get a chance to hear it with me. Thank you very much. You inspired us, you gave us some valuable knowledge, and we feel that you will go on another half hour. Anyhow, I know Dr. Watson is going to make better use of you in the future. Thank you very much, and it was a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walker. And I see my friend from the other side of Barbados present, and I'll ask him to, since you were called by Dr. Goodridge, you might as well pray for him and us. Let us all stand as we await
The Lord be with you. Great. Almighty God, as always, we pause to give you thanks for the blessings of our lives. We thank you for being able to come together this evening for this special lecture. We thank you for the lecture. We thank you for what he's been able to impress on us of who we are and where we have come from. And we pray, Lord, that what we have heard will help us to be better people and better prepared for the work that you have for us. And Lord, as we are about to leave this place, we pray that you will go before us, protect and guide us. Help us to continue to work for you in our various areas of endeavor. We pray these things through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Praise the Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, the fellowship of the Holy Spirit, be with us all. Amen. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Go in peace to love and serve.
In the name of Christ.